So that was an Andantino, number 27 from Giuliani's Op.50. Follow the lesson for free. We'll be talking about some fingering options and some textures here. But if you're interested, I do have an edition of all 32 works in Giuliani's Op.50, and there's a link for that in the description. So a couple of things to talk about in this piece, partly about the original edition of it and my edition, and just some choices that we need to make when we're talking about that. Before I kind of go through the piece bit by bit, in measure 28, there on the second beat in the original publication, there's no bass note on the second beat. And so in many editions, you'll see a rest there. But I really do think actually, especially in retrospect, performing it like what I just did there, is put a D on that note. On the second beat of bar 29, play a D in the bass, just as it occurs in measure 25. So in measure 25, in measure 28, D, as it occurs in measure 24 actually. So at the beginning of 24, it's in measure 28. I think you should play a D in the bass. I think it's probably just an error, but like I said, many editions will put a rest there, but feel free to play a D to make it more consistent. So in this particular piece, there's a couple of things to talk about. We have a lot of textures in thirds, so we'll be talking about that, and then just navigating some of the different fingerings in this piece. So I think what I'll do is I'll just do a walkthrough. But of course, whenever you have a very melodic piece like this, play the melody on its own. That's the upper voice and the upper note of the thirds. You know, that is what you really want to come across. There's a couple of complicated things that occur in this piece, but guitar technique aside, you really just want that very nice, simple little melody to come out nice and cheerfully, and then everything else that occurs is just something you're dealing with in terms of your instrument. So stay focused on that. Now, because of all the thirds here, there's lots of fingering choices. I'm mainly looking to use a lot of 4 and 3 on these note groups here. And that's debatable. Like you could play this differently in the first measure even. You could go, you know, that's perfectly acceptable to slide the second finger around. I'm kind of avoiding it to just keep my hand position in one position of the guitar more often because there would just be so much moving around. But it's not that fast of a texture, so of a piece, so by all means, if you prefer to use guide fingers, feel free to do so. I like it when my students become comfortable with the 4-3 group because I think it's good for your hand position. You know, it gets your hand turned around here, making sure that it's aligned. And once it's aligned, these kinds of finger groupings are fairly straightforward. Nevertheless, those are the two options that you can choose from. And in my edition, I choose 4 and 3 on lots of the B and D groupings. So let's just go through it. I am observing the rests in the bass at the beginning. So putting my thumb back on that bass string to stop the sound on the second beat, simultaneous with the upper notes. Same thing there. So muting the bass again. I think one of the reasons I chose 4-3 is because of this particular grouping here. Because of the slur, you definitely want to use 2-3 here. And then it just makes sense to keep your third finger on the second string and guide it up that string. So when I look at bar 4, I definitely want to use 4/3, and then when I look back at the first measure, that encourages me to use 4/3 as well, just to kind of keep things consistent through the piece. So from the beginning again, nice and slow. When you get to measure 9, I like to just kind of bring the energy down a little bit. And then return to the original energy level. Measure 17, it's the same basic material, so the same chord progression and everything like that as the opening section, but it's just broken into these arpeggios now. So in the right hand here, I prefer to use the fingering M, I, M, I, M, I, A. I think it's just like really straightforward, M-I, 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 right? And then for the next measure, A-I-M, A-M. I think that gets you through those two measures fairly nicely. And continue to mute the bass notes on the rests. And I think you do need a slur from that A to E. It'll smooth it out. You could do it without. Just a little bit more blocky. I think that the slur facilitates the legato quite nicely there. It's not in the original, so you can just add it in yourself. Material basically. In some ways, this is a very straightforward piece. You know, if you have my edition, just follow my fingering and work on it really slow until those hand positions are all worked out and all the chord shapes are worked out. And that you have a melody that's flowing nicely. And then when it goes into the kind of variations on that same chord progression, you're just progressing through it nice and legato. On another hand, though, it's a deceivingly difficult little piece because there's just lots of opportunity for error. Even sometimes, like, you know, if you don't have your left hand aligned properly, these groupings will buzz or something like that. So you have to be careful about that. Also, the tempo can be very deceiving as well. The 16th notes at the end are quite fast, even though the opening seems so slow. So you just want to make a compromise there and make sure that you have enough tempo at the beginning to carry you through the phrase, but not so much that the 16th notes become too difficult or virtuosic at the end, because it is just an Andantino. I think it should be delivered fairly comfortably, but nevertheless you have to kind of balance those two textures, the opening texture and then the 16th notes that occur. Pretty enjoyable little piece once you get past that, and lots of little things to work on, but nothing in particular more to talk about compared to any other piece. I like the kind of form of the piece, though, that it has like that chord progression and then followed by like a little variation on it, and then essentially an extended coda that travels through some cadences all the way up to the dramatic ending.